Hey YouTube, thanks for joining me. So I'm going to start a new series that I'm calling TMI Tuesdays Trans Q&A. So every Tuesday I'm going to try to release a video where I take viewer questions or questions from Twitter or questions from my own students, and then I'll just answer them as honestly as I can. Hi, I'm Dr. Rachel McKinnon, making gender make sense. Let's get to it. So first question is, what are your chromosomes? I have no idea. I've never had them tested. I think that most people don't actually know what their chromosomes are. We just assume that, well, if you are male, you have XY. But we know too much about biology now to know that that's a super reliable inference to make. Intersex people are more common than people think, and there are lots of ways for you to look male and yet not have XY chromosomes. So I can guess what my chromosomes are, but it would be a guess. I've never had it tested. What is your biggest day-to-day struggle? So I am a international level competitive cyclist. Literally, my biggest day-to-day struggle is not eating too much food because I have to keep my weight down for performance reasons, and I like food. So honestly, my biggest day-to-day struggle is just not eating too much. It isn't a gender question. I'm sorry to disappoint. When did you know you were trans? This is a really tough question, actually. So the traditional transgender narrative is that people know from the time that they were around 3, and they never really identified with the gender that people thought that they would. So if you are assigned a gender at birth of being a boy, then we expect trans people who were born that way to play with dolls, play house, they didn't like sports, things like that. But that's not actually a very typical story. So I didn't start thinking that I might be trans until about 12, about the time of puberty. And it really started with just thinking, I think I would be happier as a girl. And it wasn't until about 28, so 15 years later, 16 years later, that I really got to buckle down and think about who am I, what am I? And it was this weird moment when I finally considered, could it be that I'm trans? Could it be that not just I would be happier as a woman, but maybe I am a woman? And it was this real aha moment. Something just clicked for me and it just made sense. So really, I went from not really knowing and sort of wondering what's going on to merely being open to the possibility to immediately knowing that it was true. So I was about 28 when it happened. How did your friends and family respond when you came out to them? Sometimes I get asked, do I have any advice for people who might be thinking about coming out as trans? And I want to connect these two questions because the way I went about coming out to my friends and family, I think mirrors what I recommend for other people. It's well known that LGBTQ people are too often ostracized from their own families. And many of us are, in a sense, forced to make our own, what we call glitter families, our own queer families. Maybe not our blood families, but close enough. So before I came out to my parents and my family, I came out to my closest friends first. Because if things went poorly with my family, at least I would have my friends. At least I could start forming my glitter family if things went really bad. So I came out to my closest core friends first, and that went really, really well. They were super supportive. Oddly enough, because I sort of became more and more comfortable with myself and happier, I made more friends through the transition than I had before. So it was a huge net gain for me. Then I came out to my parents, and understandably, that's a really difficult thing to handle. And it took them a little bit of time to come around, but things went really, really well. So the joke I often tell is it's kind of clear that my mom always wanted a girl, and The first time that we went shopping together and she realized how happy I was and how no one was giving me a hard time, she sort of knew then that, oh, things will be okay. Everything's good. So things are great with my family. What's the process behind name changing, if there even is a process? So being Canadian, I was in the province of Ontario during my transition, and to have your name legally changed depends on what province you're in. It's just a form that you fill out and you explain the reason for your name change. So for me, it was just gender transition, and you send in your payment. And then you get your name changed and you get a little certificate about the name change. You take that to your driver's license and your bank and everything to have your name changed on record. So it's not a very painful process where I came from, but in the States, it's a little bit different. So in the States, it generally requires a court order. So you have to fill out paperwork and a filing fee, and you go to a court, and then you hope you get a judge that isn't a transphobic asshole who signs off on your name change. Unfortunately, a lot of trans people have their petitions denied because they get a judge who's a transphobic asshole. So some trans people get lawyers to help them through this process. Having a lawyer makes it more likely that you'll be successful in your name change petition. The problem is that's expensive, and the economic data on trans people is not very favorable. Trans people don't tend to make a lot of money because of employment discrimination. So the reality of a name change process in the States is much, much worse, much more oppressive than something like Canada, or certainly Ontario, where I'm from. Now, I did change my name twice. For my middle name, I adopted the name my parents would have given me if they had gotten it right the first time, so my middle name is Veronica. Last one for today. How do you have sex? Well, that's kind of personal, but this is TMI Tuesday. I don't have sex. Not really. So about 4 months ago, I figured out that I identify as asexual, that sex has always been like a really stressful thing for me, and the stress of sex, even with a very forgiving, patient partner, just isn't worth it for me. So I basically don't have sex. But before I figure that out, same way lesbians have sex, right? Just use your imagination. Maybe don't use it too much, but I just had sex, like most lesbians do. Okay, so that's TMI Tuesday for this week. Thanks for joining me. If you want to ask me more questions that I might address in a future video, put a comment down below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to see more. See you later.